Wherever you are on your leadership voyage, it starts here.
Welcome to Leadership Voyage, the podcast dedicated to your pursuit of becoming a great leader. My name is Jason Wick, and thank you for joining us for Season 1, Episode 9, with the author of Negotiation Simplified, Jim Reiman. Jim Reiman is a business executive, public and private company board director, commercial lawyer, and educator. He practiced law in Chicago, Illinois, law firms for 19 years before commencing a business career, during which he served as CEO and chairman of public and private companies. He currently serves as an arbitrator and mediator of complex domestic and international business disputes, teaches negotiation to senior executives, government officials, and professionals at executive education programs around the world, including the Oxford Program on Negotiation at the University of Oxford Syed Business School, and teaches and qualifies senior attorneys in international arbitration. As CEO and then chairman, Jim turned around a failing chain of cell phone stores based in Shanghai, China, grew the company from 30 stores to over 300, and took the company public on the London Stock Exchange's AIM market in 2005, and grew the company from $2.25 million in revenue to over $250 million in 2012. Jim is also the co-inventor of technologies that have been awarded 19 domestic and international patents. This conversation is a really interesting one and unique to anything that we have talked about so far on the show. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. And before reading the book and talking to Jim, I think my definition has become a lot more specific and useful, which also helps me see where I could maybe apply the tactics of negotiation more broadly. Sit back and enjoy Season 1, Episode 9 of Leadership Voyage with Jim Reiman. Thanks, everybody, for joining again to Leadership Voyage. I am here with Jim Reiman, the author of Negotiation Simplified. Jim, nice to see you this afternoon.
Thank you. A real pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We have a really unique topic, I think, in negotiation. First of all, congratulations on the book, released last year, 2021. I got a chance to read through most of it in the last couple of weeks. So very, very nice stuff. I am curious, kind of personally for you, from where does your interest in negotiation stem? How did it come to be?
I've been doing deals my whole life as a practical matter. I started my career as a trial attorney, but very quickly segued into doing business transactions and negotiating and documenting business deals in the role of an attorney. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed creating things as opposed to fighting over past issues. So as my career progressed, I segued out of law, actually into the business world. Did a couple of turnarounds, built businesses, but I've been doing deals my whole life. And that's really the genesis of it. And then I had the opportunity to start teaching negotiation at the University of Oxford, which is a great honor and a lot of fun because of the quality of that program.
I love that line though too. That I've been making deals my whole life. It's a nice succinct caption for the whole thing. No, thanks for the explanation. You know, when you and I spoke on the phone for the first time a couple of weeks ago, you said kind of quickly you went the story of the sisters and the orange, and you explained to me by using this story as a vehicle to kind of explain negotiation a little bit. Would you mind sharing that with our listeners?
Sure, but a preface first.
Sure.
If you read 20 books on negotiating, and I've read a lot of them, we say virtually the same thing. It's different how we address the topic and how we explain it. What's going to resonate with you is what the difference. To the extent that I've added anything to the literature, it's my laser focus on goals and setting goals. Mm-hmm. Goals drive everything. And it continually surprises me how often, or I'm going to turn around, how rarely people truly understand where they want to end up before they begin. So it's all about goal setting. This story is usually used, and it's a very common story, and it's usually used to illustrate the concept of asking why. And we'll talk about that later as we get into your interview, I anticipate. So the story goes like this. There's a mother and two daughters in the kitchen preparing a celebratory dinner. There's a single orange on the table. Both daughters reach for the orange at the same time, hence a fight ensues. The mother, very wise, asks daughter A, why do you need the orange? And by the way, you can't split the orange in the middle and each daughter takes half the orange. Both daughters need the entire orange. Yep. Daughter A's answer, I need the entire peel for its zest for the cake frosting that I'm making. Okay. Daughter B, why do you need the orange? I need the entire juice of the orange for the salad dressing that I'm making. Solution's very simple. The mother's very wise. One daughter gets the juice, the other gets and everybody's happy. The story is usually and almost exclusively told to illustrate the concept of asking why, fundamental principle in negotiating and resolving deadlock, etc. I use it to illustrate the concept of goals. If each daughter had understood that their goal was not the orange, but the juice of the peel, there would not have been a dispute. And when you go into a negotiation, you have to understand what it is that you want with the granularity of juice or peel, not orange. And that drives the entire process of a negotiation.
Obviously, it's very important to the process of the negotiation and the goals, but how much of what you just said is semantics to us in our own frame? I need the orange, right? I need the peel, right? I mean, I'm curious.
But you don't need the orange, but that's the point.
Yep.
So how do you, look, let's go back a couple of steps. A negotiation is a process. That's a critical concept. And what are you doing during that process? You're identifying three elements: goals, needs, and wants. Your goal is where you want to end up, and you really have to understand that with that granularity. Your needs, what are all of the things that are critical to your deal or that you must have in order to achieve your goal? Wants, what are all the things that would be nice to have that's not critical? And then during the process of the negotiation, you're identifying your counterparts. Notice I didn't say adversary, your enemy. I didn't say your competition, your counterparts, goals, needs, and wants. The importance of understanding that is not semantics. It's not an orange. It's juice or peel for exactly the reason that was illustrated in that story of the daughters and the mother in the kitchen. You're not trying to secure the orange. And by understanding that that's not your goal, you break a deadlock and you find matters to trade. And at the end of the day, there is horse trading. There is trading that goes in place. But what you're doing is you're trading matters of low value to you for matters that have high value, but concurrently low value to your counterpart. So the orange can't be split, but by understanding that you're looking for an element of the orange, not the orange, that's how you create value and secure all of your needs. Is that helpful?
Of course, yeah. Hopefully not to be redundant, but in the case here, what's of high value to one daughter is the peel, and the other daughter, what's of high value is the juice, right? Simple as that.
Right. Those are the needs. I'll give you another example, a common example, first used in the very famous seminal work, Getting to Yes. And it has to do with the negotiations over the Sinai Desert that Jimmy Carter negotiated. And the essence of the dispute was control of the Sinai. Israel demanded control of the Sinai. Egypt demanded the return of the Sinai. What was really going on there, understanding what the parties' goals were, was critical. For Egypt, it was security, because at the Yom Kippur War, Egypt had placed their troops on the border of Israel on Yom Kippur Day. They crossed the border and invaded Israel, got pushed back. Israel needed that buffer zone for security. For Egypt, it was sovereignty. It was national pride. So when you understood what the goal was, what the need was, the solution became obvious. You create a buffer zone. So sovereignty was returned to Egypt, and an independent neutral party, the UN, was placed to manage the buffer zone. That's the criticality of understanding what's your goal and what are your needs. Israel didn't care about the ownership of the Sinai. They didn't care about controlling the Sinai. They cared about not having Egyptian troops on the Sinai so that they had a buffer zone. That's the issue. And
Right.
that's why it's not semantics. It's
Sure.
really much deeper and more fundamental.
The Sinai was their way to try to express the goal, which was not the true root goal.
Well, Israel had been occupying the Sinai, but occupying it not because they wanted it, but because they wanted the security that it gave them.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Again, the book is Negotiation Simplified, and so some things sound simple, and maybe the end result is to have a simple framework, but the work involved to get to the understanding of why are the goals is a little bit of effort, it seems like, which makes sense, right? Otherwise, we'd already be good at negotiating, I suppose, wouldn't we?
Yeah, well, I mean, the essence of the title is that my description of the process is to simplify it, because so many, and the reason I wrote the book is so many of the books were either overly technical, very academic, relating all kinds of studies, or overly simplistic. And I wanted to find that middle ground. So the process itself is complex because anything that's multifaceted is complex. But how I explain that process, I hope, was simplified, because I distill it down to there's four basic elements that are important, and then try to simplify the explanation of those four elements.
Let's talk a little bit about something that comes up in the book, is the difference between negotiating and haggling. For me, this was a helpful distinction because I think before I was reading your book, I was thinking haggling is negotiating. So the example in my mind I think of is my in-laws have a home in Mexico, and my father-in-law always says, oh yeah, when you go to the market and something's 1,000 pesos, just tell them you'll pay them 500 pesos, right? What's the difference between negotiating and haggling?
Well, you just described haggling. Haggling is where you have an item that's worth $10 objectively. The vendor wants $100, you offer 10 cents, and you keep splitting the difference until you get there. That's haggling. Negotiating is a reasoned-based process where both parties are exploring what are the goals, what are the needs and the wants of the other side. So once that understanding is achieved, then you can have a rational trading of the various wants, not the needs, because you got to have all your needs in order to secure your goals, but a rational trading of the wants. And the difference between a deal, a good deal, and a great deal is the number and the quality of the wants that are achieved by each side. So let me give you a simple example of this. Let's assume that you're applying for a job or you're about to be hired. They want to hire you. Now you're in the negotiation of the deal. So let's make it real simple. There's four elements. There's salary, there's the start date, there's the location, and the vacation time, how long and when do you take it. Those are the four elements on the time. Salary is important to both sides. Let's take that off the table. You reach a mutually agreeable number, someplace in the middle that's consistent with the market and your desires. Start date. You don't care whether you start tomorrow or you start 30 days from now. You're happy to take the time off. The employer has a deal. They need you tomorrow. They need you to start immediately. Okay. Location. You could work in New York, you could work in Chicago, you're agnostic on that particular issue, and the salary will be adjusted based upon the cost of living in either city. So we're going to take location off the table. Vacation. You've got a vacation that you planned with your family for months. You got to have that vacation 6 months from now, and it's got to be 3 weeks, not 2.
Okay.
Vendor doesn't care when you take it as long as you can start now and finish this project.
Right.
And they're willing to give you the extra week to get you to start tomorrow. Guess what? Low value to you start date, high value to the employer. Vacation, date and time, high value to you, low value to the employer. There's your trade. That's how you create value for both sides. Win-win is everybody's talks about win-win. I think that's utterly simplistic and unrelated to the title of the book. It's not about win-win. It's about securing as many of your wants as you can and securing the value of the wants that are really important to you. That little example illustrates how you do that. The negotiation is really a three-part process. Part one, before the negotiation begins, preparation. And the essence of the preparation is understanding with the granularity of juice or peel what your goal is, what you want to get there. Okay. Once you identify that, then you identify the needs. What are all of the things that you must secure, in order for a goal to be achieved? And then wants. What are all the things you want? And here's the important piece. What's the value of each of those wants? Okay. Some people put a scale of 1 to 10. I actually like that. And you value them. Then the negotiation starts. You're trying to identify the goals, the needs, and the value of the wants. Well, what the wants are and the value of the wants of your counterpart. Act one is the learning process. And you learn your counterpart's positions, and conversely, you disclose yours. Not completely disclose, but you disclose so that you can now get to, once all the information is there, now you can begin what I call Act Two, or the trading process, where you trade start date for vacation. Okay. That's the negotiation, and that's the process. And that's very different from, I drop 10 cents, you come up 10 cents. That's haggling.
Right.
And actually, I will tell you that in negotiations, and often in mediations, I serve as a mediator, somebody says, well, I just came down 10%, you've got to come up. And my response is, no, I don't. I gave you a reasoned-based analysis for the price that I'm asking. All you've done is demonstrate that the price that you have set is irrational and it has no basis. So give me a reason to change.
Interesting. I did want to go back to a detail you said there for a second, because I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that most of the people listening don't have the direct types of experience that you have when it comes to negotiation. And so you said in this discussion between ourselves and our counterpart that we reveal our wants, but then you quickly interrupted yourself and said, well, not necessarily all your wants. What is the nuance in this? Because I do think when we think about negotiation, we think about maybe, this glamorized thing of I've got something hiding or what is that? What did you mean when you said, well, don't disclose, I will not disclose all my wants?
Well, you've got to be careful. Let's go back to the employment example that I used. I would not disclose that I don't care whether I start on day one or 30 days from now. I would disclose that that's something that's open for negotiation.
I see. That makes perfect sense now. I get it. You're being honest, but not transparent entirely, perhaps.
Honesty is critical. Yeah, honesty is important. And at Oxford, we make a big deal about honesty because the world is really small, and it's getting even smaller with globalization. And I will tell you, I refuse to do deals with people because in the past they've lied to me. And there are certain companies that I won't do business with because, of their ethics, the way they do business. It's just not worth it. And you can put a cost to that, and you can do a risk assessment to ethics and then cost it out. And those that are far more quantitative than I actually do that. So ethics is important, but transparency and how transparent you are is really what we're talking about, and that illustrates it. So you wouldn't lie, but you don't have to say, I don't care whether they start today or start tomorrow. You'd hold that information back so that you have some leverage in the trading.
That makes sense. Good. Thank you for the clarification on that. Early on, you had said something about, sometimes we might start negotiating before we truly understand our goal. Why is there a tendency for that to happen, do you think?
I can't answer the question except that it's more common than not.
Okay.
Embarrassingly, I'll relate this story. I knew I
Yes.
wanted to write. I knew I wanted to write this book, and I had a sense of what I wanted to write. And I got the first draft out, and I sent it to a colleague. Actually, he's the academic director at the Oxford Program of Negotiation to review it, and to give me, his thoughts and his feedback. And he said, "Jim, why are you writing this book? What's your goal?" And I hadn't really thought about it. I got to tell you, I was mortified by the question.
Because here, read this book.
Well, and in the program, they kid me that I'm Mr. Goals.
Yeah,
because I really
love it.
focus on goals, and I ask about goals all the time. And I hadn't really thought through in my own mind, what is it that I wanted to achieve with this book? I was about 85% there, but I hadn't really crystallized it. And having crystallized it, the name of the book came out.
Yeah.
That was how I was able to divine and develop the title. And it changed the focus a little. I can't, I'm not a psychologist. I can't answer why, but most people really don't take the time and it's a conscious effort to really sit back and think about it. Think about the fights that you have with, or disagreements, not fights.
There you go.
With your spouse. Why are you fighting about who's taking out the garbage tonight?
Yeah.
It's usually not about it's my turn, it's your turn. It's usually about something else. So what are you trying to achieve in this dispute? In a complex business negotiation, or even a simple interpersonal negotiation, if you can stop and focus upon what is it that you want to achieve, that's going to give you the pieces and the analytical process to understand what you're doing, where you're going, what do you need, what do you want, and how do you achieve those needs and wants.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, and for sharing the personal anecdote as well, Jim. I love it. I wish
I'm really embarrassed.
I wish people could see your facial expressions, but that's okay. They'll just take our word for it. One thing I'm also wondering about, kind of in the broader sense, is in this podcast, talk about a lot of different topics and how it might relate to leadership. So however you might define a leader in your own mind, how important is this skill of negotiation in your mind to being an effective leader for someone?
It's critical to leadership, but it really goes back to one's definition of leadership. One leads by example. People do what they observe, not what they're told. So how one negotiates and one's understanding of negotiation is all part of the process of leadership. I describe negotiation, success in negotiation requires honing just 4 skills. One of the 4 being listening. Good leaders listen, and they listen carefully. And I talk about this in negotiation. Many of the skills of a successful negotiator are identical to the skills of a successful leader. In terms of listening, there's really 3 elements of listening. Listening to what's being said by your counterpart, really hearing it. Listening to yourself. Are you communicating effectively that which you want to communicate? Hearing yourself, that's being self-aware. And then this last one, hearing what's not said, which often is the loudest statement in the entire room. So, good leaders listen really well, and they understand those 3 elements of listening, core skill of a successful negotiator. So they go hand in hand, and many of the skills are the same.
And as a quick aside for those listening, the 6th chapter of this book has a lot of really interesting real life testimonials, I guess we can call them, real stories told by others. And then Jim adds a paragraph at the end, kind of how does this relate to what we've talked about earlier in the book about negotiating? And it's really, really interesting. So when I was reading through the book, Jim, related to self-awareness, not during negotiation for myself, but what I was thinking was, gosh, I wonder when I'm not even aware of a negotiation situation. I wonder if I'm not even dialed into the fact that I am now negotiating, which maybe relates back to not knowing a goal or something. Suddenly I'm in a situation, and perhaps this is a moment to apply certain skills here.
Well, it's interesting because you asked me about leadership, and I'm thinking about leadership, and I'm thinking about the core skills of a great leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at my list of what are the core skills of a great negotiator, and they're almost identical. Let's talk about them. Success in negotiation, and which I articulate in the book, requires 4 skills. 1, goal setting. Well, a good leader has a clear understanding of where he or she is taking
we have a vision, right?
The company or whatever. They have a clear goal. Secondly, preparation. They didn't just come to that by having a dream in the middle of the night. That goal was the result of preparation, and how that goal gets executed or achieved is the result of preparation. So preparation is key to leadership. Listening, we've talked about, and being self-aware, we've talked about. Those are the key elements of leadership, in my opinion, and they're coincidentally, and I had not realized this until now, the same key elements of a successful negotiator. So I guess
I love it.
Same skills, different application.
Yeah, there you go. Same skills, different application. That's great. We've talked a couple times about the importance of understanding your goal, right? What tips can you give us to help effectively set a good goal?
Go back to the story of the orange. Understand with granularity what it is that you want. To do that, you ask the question that the mother asked and that Jimmy Carter asked, why? Why is this important? That's how you get there. So what am I trying to achieve here? There's a discipline in there is a process, and there's a discipline in the process. And if you skip a step, you get 80% of the way there. But that last step of really asking why, drilling down, what is it? Do I want the orange? No, I really don't want the orange. I want the juice with the peel. That's the key to success, really understanding what you want and why you want it, because that drives everything else. Once you understand that, that's going to tell you exactly what you need. You need the entire peel, not half the peel. And once you understand that, that's going to give you the questions to ask to get what you want from your counterpart to achieve whatever those needs are.
Yeah, no, thank you. Asking ourselves the right questions, asking ourselves why, continuing to dive deeper and get the true goals, the true whys. No, that's great. Again, the description of the process, simple. The process itself requires reflection, deep thought, right? A true surveying of the entire situation. I love it. It's a great way to frame it.
Lawyers learn in law school, the first year of law school. I was asked the question in contracts class I was told this the first day of contracts class. The questions are the answers.
Okay.
It took me this semester to really understand it, and lawyers really dig into, because the questions do derive the answers, and I won't bore you with the legal analysis there. But the questions are the answers, and you need to ask questions, and you need to ask lots of questions, and the answers to the questions you ask are going to provide additional questions that you need to delve into, and that's how you continually narrow what you're doing. In the book, I use the metaphor of a spiral, and you spiral down to zoom in to get exactly where you need.
Now, I work mostly for my in my day job work. I work in software product development, and I don't know, Jim, if you are familiar with Clayton Christensen and jobs to be done theory, but what is really interesting to me is the relationship of understanding why, or understanding our goal, and this theory. And there's kind of this well-known anecdote in the community around jobs to be done theory, and they're trying to figure out why Burger King milkshakes are selling well in the morning.
and they're messing around with the recipe and they're doing all these things. And it goes on and on and on. But the point I'm trying to get to here is they're trying to determine the true customer need. The customer need in the case we're talking about wasn't about the milkshake itself, the taste, the recipe, maybe even that it was Burger King. I don't know. The fact was these were people who had long commutes, who wanted things that were easy to hold, that took a long time to ingest, the thickness of a shake through a straw, and the kind of the saying that comes out of this is, what were people hiring a milkshake to do? Okay, now this might sound crazy to some people, and that's fine, but it strikes me as kind of similar, because we can just pretend that we understand this is about milkshakes or something about eating the food or whatever, but really understanding why and asking the customers, why were they doing this? Why did they choose this item as opposed to a bagel with peanut butter in the car, right? To me, that sounds so similar to truly taking the time to identify, I need the orange zest for my recipe. I don't need an orange.
That makes a lot of sense. I had not heard the story, and I was really curious why milkshakes in the morning. So thanks for answering that for me. But in the business world, and if you go to business school or they spend a lot of time in business school, what is a company's core competencies? And one of the best examples, and how you define that's really critical to, goes back to your issue of leadership, is really critical to understanding what the company focuses on. And one of the best examples that I've always liked is the story of Disney. Disney wasn't in the business, arguably is in the business of creating movies and running theme parks. And McDonald's as well. McDonald's is in the restaurant business, but really they're in the experience business.
Yeah.
To deliver that, when they understand that their core competence and their core business was to deliver a discrete, well-defined experience. It's the same thing as understanding what your goal is. Once you define it as an experience as opposed to selling food or doing a ride, that changes the analysis and the understanding of what you need to do in order to preserve, continue, and grow.
Yeah, and even setting that goal around experience rather than rides inspires your employees in entirely different ways that you might innovate in a way that you've never foreseen, right? That's really interesting.
Yeah, because your ride no longer needs to be a thrilling ride. It could be satisfying a different kind of emotion.
That's great. Before we get to the last couple questions here, Jim, I did want to ask you, kind of jump back tactically for a second. We talked about needs and wants a little bit, but it is something that as I've been thinking through this, I think, I am having a hard time sometimes finding that breaking point between what a need is and what a want is. And as you've said, the key to success, well, you'll correct me if I'm not saying it right. The key to a successful negotiation is where you and your counterpart are getting all the things you need, and then you are hopefully getting your high value wants while conceding low value wants to them, your low value wants to them.
Or matters for which you have no concern, are not a want.
Or not even a want. Thank you. That's a great, kind of like, there you go. What's not being said, sometimes even more important. Needs versus wants. Do you have a way to help with that?
Sure. What's your goal? That's your first one.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to make the salad dressing.
Yep.
What are the elements? What are the ingredients that you must have, and what's the quantity of the ingredients that you must have to complete successfully your recipe? The ingredients and their quantity are your needs. Greater quantity would be a want. Okay. Something that's not critical but would spice it up a little would be a want. Go back to the employment example. Mm-hmm. And I said being in New York or being in Chicago is not critical, but maybe it was. Maybe being in one city was a need. You had to be in one city for whatever reason.
Maybe, maybe me and my partner are both looking for jobs and they just got one in New York. And so now that's a need for me. Or maybe I've lived in Chicago, but never lived in New York. So I'd prefer to try New York. That's a want. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, it seems like maybe going through examples is kind of one of the most tactical ways to practice understanding. So I
a
appreciate
need
that.
is something that you must have in order to achieve your goal.
Yep.
So the recipe is a good metaphor for that.
So much great stuff, Jim. I appreciate it. I'm learning a lot, still learning a lot in this conversation. So thank you so much for that. Before we kind of close things out here, I want to ask you what I ask everyone at the end of Leadership Voyage is, what is something that you've learned recently?
I'm going to give you 2 examples.
Okay.
And for your audience, you gave me a heads up about the question so I could think about it, which I really appreciated. Answer number 1 is something that I've known, but I've never really focused upon or understood the depth of this. And that is how important a preconceived understanding of an issue is to the process of negotiation and to your worldview. And similarly, how difficult it is to change that preconceived notion. If you believe something to be facts that support your belief, you are going to value much higher, have much greater credibility with you than facts that are contrary to your belief. And you're doing that on a subconscious basis. You see this in the political world, and I'm not going to go into any political examples, but you see this in the political world a lot in terms of the choice of spokespeople, of networks, of analysts that you read. They are confirming. In the negotiating world, you see this in terms of understanding and valuing arguments that resonate to you are unimportant, finding arguments that resonate with your counterpart. But how you determine what you think resonates is important based upon what you believe is important. And I've recently read a couple of articles and studies that are quantifying and demonstrating that concept. In fact, they just published one. I do a monthly newsletter. I just published one in my newsletter. So the importance and the challenge of overcoming preconceived beliefs, that would be one answer. Cool. The second answer is completely off the wall. It's I've always been fascinated by quantum physics and quantum mechanics. I've read a little about it. I don't understand it. It is so counterintuitive that time can flow backwards, which is being proven within the field of quantum mechanics, that the mere act of observing something changes the result, which has been proved multiple times in quantum physics. It's mind-bending. I'm a fan of science fiction. It's mind-bending. I don't get it. I don't believe that I even understand the nuances of it and the most simple level of it. But I find it fascinating, and I keep digging into it and keep getting confused and more flabbergasted by the counterintuitiveness of it.
No, good. Thanks for sharing those two answers, Jim. That's great. I appreciate that. For those who've been listening and want to check out what you're up to, what your services are, anything like that, where should we direct them?
Well, act as an arbitrator and a mediator of commercial disputes, and I have a website called Reiman ADR. That stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution. ReimanADR.com, and I do a monthly newsletter, which you can find on that website, so you can view that. You, of course, can read my book, and you can reach me from my website or from my book website, which is negotiationsimplifiedbook.com.
Jim, thanks for setting some time aside today. It's been my pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for teaching me so much and for walking me through so much here. It's been a really great experience. So thanks so much for taking a few minutes.
It's been a lot of fun and a real honor. Thank you.